Hello everybody, and welcome to Galactic Tabletop. I'm Alex. Today, we're going to be talking about the setting of Stars Without Number, starting where it all began with a very important man, Dr. Tiberius Korn. We are going to start all the way in the beginning of this setting in the year 2108. With Dr. Tiberius Korn and his fantastic discovery of the meta-dimension. Dr. Tiberius Korn was an eccentric scientist exploring interstellar travel. During this exploration, he discovered an unusual force outside of our own dimension. Korn named this unusual force the meta-dimension. Fueled by his discovery, he was able to create the first faster-than-light engine, which he named the Spike Drive. Instead of going through all of the red tape of bureaucracy, Dr. Korn decided to build his own spaceship to test this new invention. Dr. Korn then launched himself into space at speeds no human has ever gone. This caused an uproar in the science community as nation's leading scientists tried to figure out what was happening. Dr. Korn was able to leave atmosphere and made his jump into the stars. 13 days later, Dr. Korn returned in orbit and transmitted data about Alpha Centauri that could only be surveyed in person. Dr. Korn then openly broadcast how to make spike drives to the whole world. Once the broadcast was complete, he then jumped back into deep space and was never seen or heard from again. So what is a spike drive and what is the metadimension? The metadimension is an alternate reality or dimension that we can travel through, which is significantly quicker than anything we can do in what is now deemed mundane space. And spike drives are the faster-than-light engine that we use to get into that dimension. Now this is fantastic for traveling across the universe. However, there are some things that need to be taken care of so that you can get from one star to another. When the spike drive jumps you into the metadimensional environment, it brings along a bubble of what is deemed mundane space. This bubble is what protects the ship from being destroyed by this metadimensional environment. The environment erodes away the protective bubble over time, and if the bubble does significantly erode, the ship will be destroyed. The problem is that only a great gravitational force can pull you out of this metadimensional environment. So what does have enough gravitational force to pull you out of the metadimension? Stars. Stars are the only celestial object with enough force to do this. Space rocks and planets just don't cut it. If you are really wanting to be able to jump to like this massive planet that has enough gravitational force, just remember it's mass that equals gravity, not necessarily size. So if you look at neutron stars are immensely tiny compared to other celestial objects. The neutron stars we have studied are smaller than our sun, but have significantly stronger gravitational pulls. This is because of density of the mass. So if you are going to have them be able to jump to like a planet that maybe once was a star, but then collapsed down on itself and is no longer emitting all that radiation, that's completely feasible. You can do that. However, just remember, size does not equal gravity. Now we are going to get into some of the history of what Earth did with all this information and this ability to go faster than light and discover a plethora of new planets. The first planet that was inhabitable was discovered in 2113 by Greater Europe. Once this planet was discovered, Earth was renamed to Terra. 7 years later, Pan-India scouts discovered the first life-bearing world in 2120, and it came in the form of bacteria living in water. This discovery caused for a new scientific branch called xenobotanists. The next major event was astromining technology, which came into being in 2130. When astromining technology was developed, this was a huge boom to Terra's economy. Businesses started to expand all across the galaxy and beyond. This was due to a huge influx now of raw resources coming to Terra, and they were able to build spaceships and spike drives faster and cheaper. 20 years later, an American survey crew discovered alien ruins on a moon called Typhon. This occurred in 2150, and the ruins were projected to be 40,000 years old. By the year 2200, every inhabitable planet within a spike drive year had a colony on it. Now that we have gone over some discoveries, we're going to go over what is called the Mandate. The Mandate is a Terra force that was formed to help them control the spread of these colonies going all across the Milky Way galaxy. They did this because Terra was losing control of what were called rim planets, or the planets that were furthest away. It was taking Terra over 4 months in metadimensional space travel just to get to these rim planets. To prevent the loss of power from controlling these planets, the governments of Terra made a government force called the Terra Mandate. This organization was dedicated to policing human space and exerting the authority of Terra governments to the far-flung colonies. The Terra Mandate demanded the obedience of colonies and forbade further expanse. Terra claimed they did this to promote social harmony and security. However, they were hard-pressed to still control these colonists, as many splinter groups formed and they left for the far dark. With all these colonies forming, we now have a plethora of people being exposed to this metadimensional environment. And it's infecting kids and babies alike. They are being exposed to these high energies that are being imbued into them. This imbuing was called MES. And when they were first discovered in 2240, it was termed to call them messes. Now, messes would show some amazing psychic abilities such as teleportation, healing the sick and injured, and controlling objects with their minds. However, this all came with a catastrophic price tag. The metadimensional environment that gave them their powers was also destroying their cognitive functions. They were turning feral. They were losing their ability to reason. They were turning violent. And when you have powers such as these, when you are violent, you can be a weapon for mass destruction. With all these feral children running around, the Terra Mandate had to do something. So they formed something called the Psionic Authority to deal with these messes. When a child started demonstrating MES or psionics, they were taken from their families to be quote-unquote trained. But in truth, this was nothing more than horrible, deadly experiments being conducted on these children so that the Psionic Authority could understand this better. In fact, it wasn't until 35 years later that they actually learned anything about messes and how to control that ability. The damage caused by using the abilities of these psionics was completely unavoidable. However, like a river, you can route this damage through less important functions of your brain. The way they achieved this was having messes go through meditation, focus, and mental training. The training was that of such a nature that you could only learn it from an experienced teacher. The Psionic Authority did try to make an online course for parents to be able to teach their kids. However, it did not work, and the feral children were still popping up. Once a mess completed their training, they were now called psychics. A properly trained psychic could be a boon to any colony, and many colonies welcomed and held psychics in high esteem. However, some colonies feared psychics, believing that this training only delayed the process of them becoming feral. Once they were complete with their training, they could either choose to continue and join the Psionic Authority, or go and rejoin society and try to live a normal life. Those who did choose to live a normal life kept their abilities a secret due to the stigma of MES. Now we are going to get into something called Pre-Tech and Sci-Tech. Pre-Tech and Sci-Tech are technologies from before the Scream. Don't worry, we are going to go over the Scream in this episode. So, for starters, the Psionic Authority continues to research MES, and they still do this through, of course, dangerous experimentation and the deaths of many psychics. With all this experimentation, the Psionic Authority learns how to imbue objects with the metadimensional environment's energies. With this new form of MES, the Psionic Authority was able to make materials that would be impossible to make with the mundane laws of science. Now that they have psionic materials, this jumpstarts humanity into what is called the Golden Age of technology. Spike drives made with psionic materials can now jump twice as far and twice as fast. Humans were living several centuries with amazing health before age finally took them. Yet the greatest of these Golden Age technologies was Psi-Tech. Psi-Tech is technology that enhances individual psychic abilities. One of the most predominant pieces of Psi-Tech technology was the jump gate. Jump gates would allow for one ship to jump across the star systems to the next jump gate 10 times faster than even Psi-Tech spike drives. This allowed for what are called slow boats, which are giant boats or ships that can't use spike drives due to their size, to travel great and vast distances across the galaxy. What this meant is the vast trade of materials. So now we have planets that are going into specialization as farming worlds, as technology worlds, and as mining worlds. The only issue people had with jump gates were there were not enough psychics to operate them all. So the jump gates were quickly relegated to the most important worlds. This tended to be core worlds such as Terra and mid worlds. And the frontier worlds were still forced to use spike drives. With the jump gates in place, the Terra Mandate was able to control vaster distances much more easily. Because of this, Terra lifted the restriction they had on banning further exploration and colonization. In the year 2330, a second wave of colonists were allowed to leave. And this was quite literally a fleeing of the Terra Mandate. Billions of humans left. For the most part, the governments of Terra were happy to see these people leave. A lot of them were considered undesirables, and with humans having longer lives, the worlds were quickly becoming overpopulated. Terra quickly realized that it had released Lorraine's a little too much, and frontier planets were expanding at a vast rate. So much so that even with jump gates, it became completely unmanageable. By the year 2400, the Terra Mandate had almost no control over the frontier planets. In fact, it's deemed a polite fiction that the Terra Mandate has any control at all. Many planets had never even seen a tax collector from the Terra Mandate. Humans were expanding faster than the government. All right, now we're going to get into the Scream and the Silence. As I mentioned before, Pre-Tech and Psi-Tech were inventions prior to the Scream. So the Scream occurred in the year 2665. A pulse of a violent metadimensional energy washed over the galaxy. Spacecraft currently in the metadimensional space were completely obliterated. The psychics either dropped dead or had their brains burned away, turning them insane or worse, feral. This wave of metadimensional energy destroyed any and all sci-tech equipment, including jump gates and imbued spike drives. The entire galactic economy was put into shambles. Worlds who relied on agricultural planets to supply food quickly starved. New frontier planets awaiting shipment of much-needed tech turned to barbarism, and even fully developed planets fell as they relied so much on sci-tech and pre-tech. These failing worlds stripped junkyards of barely functioning spike drives in an attempt to get off-world. However, it didn't make any difference. The planets were becoming isolated, and they lived and died on their own ability. This was the start of a time period referred to as the Silence. The Silence is the time period of about 600 years. During this time period, there is very little to no intergalactic travel, trade, or communications. After 600 years of silence, the galaxy is beginning to put itself back together. The galaxy is fractured, and there are many loose coalitions and confederacies of like-minded planets that fill this galaxy. Most of these coalitions and confederacies only exist to protect themselves from outside planet forces such as aliens and raiders. Many weaker planets are lorded over by powerful neighbors and are oppressed into a feudal system. It is rare for a planet to actually go to war. For starters, transporting even 10,000 troops would take about 7 capital carrier-class spaceships or 10 capital battle spaceships. Outside of that, sending so many ships would leave their planet defenseless against raiders and alien incursions. This is where history ends and your world begins. As a Galaxy Master, it is now your job to build off of this and create your own galaxy. You are not restricted by anything I have just listed in this setting. If you want to make jump gates that still exist, feel free. If you want sci-tech that can be found as like magical items essentially and give them to your psychics, go ahead and do that. It's your world, and what matters most is you and your players having fun. This is just a guide onto what you can build on top of, and I found it extremely helpful when it came to building my own galaxy. Thank you for joining me as we explore the depths of Stars Without Number. Please go ahead and subscribe and give us a like. It goes a long way into supporting the channel and spreading this amazing hobby of tabletop RPG. Until next time, I'm Alex, and this has been Galactic Tabletop.